Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and I hope everybody can hear okay. I'm sorry for joining a little bit late, but I have managed to catch most of the speakers, so thank you very much for those presentations, which I found really interesting. And of course, I know Kate through the restorative solutions work and the commission of that contract, and Jane through the chaplaincy that I've visited on previous occasions, and know of the really excellent work that you both carry out with your teams and organisations. So thank you for that. So, as I've said, thank you for inviting me to speak today. And obviously, the report itself I found really interesting. I think it's detailed, comprehensive, astute, and I believe it's taken about 2 years or so in terms of the consultation and the various conversations that have taken place, including with myself and colleagues from my office a little while ago. And I think it does present the reader and the Catholic Church and its members within Leeds with many, I think, very worthwhile challenges. And those challenges, I think, are quite practical, and I commend the report to you and for everybody that's listening in today. I think at times it's easy to observe things and pontificate and sort of advise without really looking at things in more detail. As I've said, I think this report does actually look at making efforts about how it encourages all of us to work together to make a difference, not just talking about things, but also actions around faith through living service, I think is one of the terms within the report as well, which I think is really positive. So there's much detail and so many down-to-earth ideas. It does make refreshing reading, and I hope that there will be ongoing dialogue as a result. I do particularly welcome the report's attempts to recognise the experiences of everyone caught up in the criminal justice system, whether that's victims, offenders, or jurors, or members of the community in some way. And it's not easy to do this, but we have to try and move forward in terms of some of the findings within this report. So I think the Catholic Church within Leeds is clearly encouraging practical commitments, such as offering buildings and estates to accommodate projects and meetings, as well as befriending and mentoring, which linking in with professionals in the National Probation Service, for example. And I think there are also many opportunities to volunteer within services for victims, such as victim support, and some very good training that goes with that as well. So this approach, I think, is very compassionate. It does make a difference to enabling a person to feel valued again, showing them that there is a place at the table for them, and that we can all contribute as members of the community. And I'll come on to that in a moment. I think also the offer does provide much needed support to voluntary sector organisations and looking at forms of sponsorship. And certainly since being elected into this role, I am a very keen supporter of the voluntary and third sector. And indeed, I set up a third sector advisory group to ensure that members of that group were or are playing a critical role in making sure the partnership efforts are on track as far as they can be. So with statutory organisations such as probation, the health service, and of course the police, they've all got their place to play in supporting victims, and those who have offered away from or ways away from criminal behaviour, it's often the third sector organisations rather than the people who work for them who make the real difference. Voluntary sector organisations are usually locally based, providing resources which are uniquely required in individual communities. Those who work for them are often very passionate about the place and the people where they live, and of the dedication and commitment towards what they do. In addition to that, they've often got roles in looking at how they monitor certain services as service users in some cases, but also can offer support without a particular agenda. And often it is very heartfelt, genuine support from people who have got some lived experience and who are prepared to give up their time to support others in making a difference between success and failure. One of the organisations I continue to support that some of you may have heard of or know about is the West Yorkshire Finding Independence, or Wi-Fi for short. And they've developed and embedded what we call a navigator methodology within many of their third sector and statutory partners. Principally, they use peer mentors who have lived experience, which gives a person with a multiple and complex needs an anchor and someone who understands or how it feels to have struggled in a similar way. So that they, in my view, they're living proof that a person can change and that the Wi-Fi model is non-judgmental, and peer mentors do not time out on anybody. They'd stick with them for the long haul, which is really important. So my team does continue to work closely with Wi-Fi to ensure that there is a lasting legacy of research and training, and that we can ensure that that model of working is sustained moving forwards. Our third sector partners are vitally important. So again, I laud your proposals within this report to support those voluntary organisations in whatever way you can, particularly during the current environment and the real challenge that we all face on the COVID impact that's having across the board. Within the report as well, you also recognise the importance of the probation service, and with the changes that we will see next year, I wanted to ensure that those third sector organisations, which are so crucial, can continue to play a part of the offer made and to those who have offended. To achieve this, I've gone to some real great efforts to try and rally support with other police and crime commissioners and all the criminal justice partners, including the Health and Department for Work and Pensions across the whole of the Yorkshire and Humber region. And indeed, I'm currently chairing a Yorkshire and Humber preventing reoffending group. So we must try to ensure that we make the most of these opportunities to reduce reoffending wherever we can, developing less complex probation systems, but one which has the needs of the service users and offenders and victims at its heart. I also support a range of organisations that support victims. Two crucial examples of that are the Sexual Assault Referral Centre, or SARC for short, and the West Yorkshire Independent Sexual Violence Advisors, which is a service, again, that we've been developing across West Yorkshire. Both of these services are open to self-referral, whether or not a victim reports to the police, and they are both available to recent and historic victims and survivors of all ages and indeed both genders. It's really important that we've developed the service in that way. They've both been nationally recognised as cutting-edge services, and in fact our new SARC premises, once you get a chance to hopefully visit them at some time in the future, in my view are a huge step up in terms of the facilities for children and young people and the remote links that we will establish to the courts in there, which will make it easier to give evidence away from the courts themselves. I think we all know, though, that there's no room for complacency, and certainly I'm proud of the improvements made in these services and the availability of them to groups and victims and survivors. Moving on from the work with adults to efforts with our young people, and again, I was very pleased to see the commitments that you make in the report to youth outreach. And I see this all too often, certainly prior to the COVID situation, about the withdrawal of youth services in many places because of the pressures on budgets. And I think we all know it is really important that the gaps which the COVID is now creating in the lives of young people, that these gaps can be sadly easily filled and exploited by those who might want to abuse or criminalise them in some way. So this is something on my agenda too. And again, you might be aware that we've been doing some work within West Yorkshire in the setting up of what we call our Violence Reduction Unit, VRU. So initially we were asked to make a bid for some government funding. We secured that for 2 years, and that's allowed us to support and look at some innovative schemes to engage and support young people who sometimes are already prolific offenders, but also those who may be on the periphery or tempted to take the wrong path. So we shouldn't forget that this is sometimes their experience of victims, for example, domestic abuse, that can then often drive offender behaviour and those early childhood experiences. So at one end of the spectrum, we've trained youth workers and worked with our local accident and emergency departments to engage those that have been admitted with knife injuries, because you've got that teachable moment, and in a sense they are a captive audience at that point in time. So it's really important that we have very skillfully supportive staff in there to help understand and identify what the dangers are, and really try and capture them at that very moment in time if they are in an accident and emergency ward. And at the other end, we're working in schools, helping those who are probably at a younger age but already potentially underachieving, and looking at what other opportunities there might be, for example, through construction industry pathways or tailor-made training schemes as a legitimate way forward, again, to try and divert them away from potential offending or getting caught up in that type of activity. So it will take a huge body of talented and committed individuals, I think, to make sure that these schemes are successful. But more than this, I think it will take genuine ongoing support from our communities to ensure that positive change can be sustained and developed. And at their frequent best, I think our church and faith groups are often central and can be key pillars of our communities within that work. So I was very pleased to see that the report does recognise that training and coaching of those involved locally will be needed to understand the environment and to be able to relate empathetically to those with well-being or addiction issues. And I think we're all aware of the challenges that are currently being unearthed as a result of the COVID situation. Again, I'm glad to see that it isn't just lip service, that it is a consolidated commitment to becoming educated, equipped and proficient in the supporting of those who are often in a much worse place than ourselves, but who need to feel valued and equal and have that self-worth to take up their own positive journey within society. But we know that we clearly can't do this on our own as individual organisations, and I'm pleased to see that the training for those involved with the Catholic Church will again look to signpost appropriately to services such as restorative justice that Kate talked about earlier. And I think we do have an excellent service in West Yorkshire, delivered through the organisation called Restorative Solutions, which I've worked with and supported, and I will clearly continue to link in with them to our victim support services as well. So bringing the impact of crimes home to those who have offended is, in my view, a proven way to develop feelings of remorse and understanding, and to really have that understanding of the gravity of actions that affects the victims. And that in turn, where it's appropriate, allows victims the space and support to meet with and to talk to offenders of their crimes, and that can be a hugely empowering experience as well for those affected, and an opportunity to move on and find some form of closure and understanding. But I think beyond remorse and rehabilitation, there also needs to be opportunities in place to fill the gap left by crime and antisocial behaviour. And that's something that is often raised by members of the community through the survey work and the conversations that I carry out throughout West Yorkshire. And those who have been victims need support to be able to cope and recover to whatever extent they can. And let's not forget that their experiences can be life-changing, either physically, mentally, or indeed both. So those who have offered need to be given the chance to feel valued and to rebuild self-worth through meaningful activity and either unpaid or paid work as a result of that can play a huge part. I was pleased also to read within the report your plans to support key issues around employment and training, and they'll be needed more than ever, I suspect, and to speak up for those whose previous convictions can cast a blight over their lives moving forward. So I have been lobbying where I can to ensure that a lot of effort is put into these initiatives to ensure that your efforts can be fully realised. And I support groups such as Offploy and Tempus Novo, who are based in West Yorkshire, and they're keen to ensure that they help people who have offended and who are given a chance to turn their lives around, valuing the diversity and difference that such individuals can make within the workforce, enabling them to be reflective of the society it serves. So it's empowering to listen to them, and I was very pleased to see plenty of references to that within the report. Last February, I launched the first ever victim strategy for West Yorkshire, supporting people harmed by crime, and I'm proud that this first strategic objective of the strategy is to, and I'll quote, put people and communities at the heart of the policy, practice and service development. So victims and survivors attended and spoke at the events we held about the strategy, along with myself, the Chief Constable, the Deputy Chief Constable, and the Victims Commissioner for England and Wales, Dame Vera Baird, who is a close colleague of mine, having been the previous Police and Crime Commissioner in Northumbria. So offenders' voices obviously need to be heard too, and very recently a report by User Voice, which is a charity organisation, has just been launched, and that's key in terms of organisations supporting and sponsoring the type of activities that I've already mentioned, but again is highlighted within your report, which is very good. And work on this started about 18 months ago and represents again my commitment to including service users in the designing of future provision. So listening to them and their thoughts and concerns to develop better ways of working and making sure solutions reflect what they tell us is really important. And I was pleased to catch what Wayne said earlier on in the conversation. So, as I've said, as we know, it's often easy to label people victims, offenders, burglars, thieves. We need to try not to use terms, but instead recognise that although a person may have been a victim or have offended in the past, that shouldn't define them for the rest of their lives. And I think anyone of any faith, including, of course, yourselves, as part of the Catholic Church, I'm sure will recognise that. And it's important what makes your efforts unique. So that ability to support or forgive and to see beyond a person's past instead of recognising the potential there. And as you say, seeking to deliver not only justice, but also mercy and support for those who have been victims. So I think the report really does highlight some really good opportunities that we potentially now have. I think it does encourage its readers and patrons to reach out and include everyone involved, regardless of their offending history. And of course, that's the Christian way, and to accept another person just as they are and to support them in a way which can encourage self-esteem, equality, and reintegration back into communities, providing purpose and with a feeling of belonging. This is what those who are marginalised for whatever reason need in order to lead pro-active and pro-social lives. So again, I'd just like to finish by thanking you for giving me this opportunity to speak and to be involved, and to congratulate you on this, what I think is a comprehensive and thought-provoking report, and to encourage and support you in the challenges which lie ahead. Thank you.